Hey everybody, and welcome to the Rabbit Trail Podcast. This is episode number 101.
101.
Yes, and that was everyone's favorite repeater.
Hey.
Hey, we're glad you're joining us. My name is Greg Harris. I'm the senior pastor at Olive Branch Community Church who sponsors this podcast, and we are inviting you to come with us as we're going to chase the truth wherever it runs and have some fun doing that at the same time. And my co-hosts here today are my normal buds.
My name is Stephen Oldham, and I'm local outreach coordinator here. Let us know where you're listening or you're watching us on. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and give us a subscription, a like. I'll hit the bell. Let us know. That'll remind you of when we're popping up on your devices. But yeah, let us know where you're listening. We like that feedback. It's really great.
Yeah. And my name is Brent. I am the Connections Pastor at Olive Branch Church, and I just want to remind you, we would love to see or hear your feedback on the show. And also, we would love to receive some of the questions. So, as you're listening to the sermon on Sunday, write down some of the questions that come to your mind and email it to us at rabbittrail@obcc.church. We would love to answer your questions, especially those that are pertaining to the message already. It's easier to fit those in. So
yeah, those get priority, right?
Yeah, those will get priority.
Yeah,
so
it helps us. It also hopefully helps you to think deeper about the message. Maybe there was something you were just like, oh, wow, I don't understand. That's fine. Like if you need even us to repeat a concept just to help kind of flesh it out. Sometimes we don't get to do that. And I guarantee you we've talked about it far more than anything gets into the message. So and I mean, one of the things we're trying to do is be a little more concise with this and not drabble on so long. So just, quick question, guys. Do you feel like instead of episode 101, we should say 101? It would just really
save like 3 seconds.
Well, because you're doing it twice too, so it would really cut some time off of the beginning part of the podcast.
I think I'm just gonna keep it fresh and see where it goes.
Keep it loose.
111 maybe or 111. Just see how long of a term we can make it. I don't know. We'll have fun with it.
And then when
Is
I
there
repeat
a right way to
you'll
do
know
it?
I'm paying attention to you.
Let's set a poll out there. Hey, everybody, do you want us to?
Oh, yeah, that would be so wild. Again, I want to remind you guys, though, we would love to hear your feedback. So rabbittrail@obcc.church. So again, we are in a new series. We just kicked it off this weekend. It's called Offended. I don't know if you guys know anybody that has ever been offended. I don't know if you guys have ever been offended yourself.
No, never.
So you might think, no, I've never been offended. I don't know anybody that's ever been offended. So this sermon series is completely useless.
Yeah, especially for 2024.
Yeah.
Nothing's going on that would make people offended.
Never.
Apparently.
But for those of you that possibly might have been offended or know somebody, this is a great sermon series to check into. And we're going to cover different aspects of responsibility and levels of offense and how to deal with that as well.
How do you guys feel about not giving trigger warnings? Should we be giving trigger warnings for this episode and the next few? It's just going to be important.
I will say this. Trigger warnings, I think we probably should just say that right now. Trigger warning, people, because especially in this culture today, it doesn't matter what you say. Somebody's going to be offended.
I'm offended that you think that.
No. You're offended of the truth then, sir.
Whose truth? My truth or your truth?
That's not
offended
our
that you
truth.
Yeah. You use the word truth. That's offensive.
I am so confused.
Who are
right
you
now.
to say what's true?
But you know what? I'm not offended.
Pilot.
In fact, one of the things you had that bullseye thing, and it was talking about apathy and irritation and anger and outrage are different levels and part of offense. And I remembered sitting there when I was kind of taking some notes, and I thought, I'm not that type of person that gets offended, easily. So I don't get offended that often. And then I thought, oh, well, that could be apathy. So I didn't write that note. I scratched it out because I don't want to be considered apathetic. That is offensive.
We actually had an awesome conversation with our kids. My wife kind of drilled in and down with my boys, and we just talked about what is it? Where are you at emotionally when somebody disagrees with you? Because we've got some pretty passionate opinions in my home. It's like do you think the rabbit trail is something? We should record my dinner conversations. This is pretty nuts. But also, did you notice that we got the idea from the rabbit trail sign? Like, see the outside and the rings go in?
Yes. Oh, awesome.
No,
the only thing about recording your dinner meals, that might
random.
be some good conversation.
It's a rabbit trail about the rabbit trail.
But the burps that would come across your table might be...
Oh, epic.
Yeah, epic.
Absolutely epic.
Like, I've heard them. I've been there.
I wasn't lying.
No, you are not lying.
Nope.
So,
I was like, it's glorious.
It's almost like Elf after he drinks the soda.
That's all fake. Like, these are real.
Fully art.
Pretty
I
amazing.
know. That is awesome. Okay, so a couple of things. One of the things, obviously, we are going to be talking about things that some people might get offended from, just because we're going to
always talk about things that people might get offended from.
I know, but I do think some of this stuff is, I think a lot of people will filter what we're saying through a political lens.
Or an ideological
you guys are picking on the left, or you guys are, and we're not doing that. We are talking about a topic. And I do believe
you just left out the right, and now people are going to think you're picking on the right because you didn't finish that sentence.
Yeah.
So we got to be really careful and dot every I, cross every T, make sure the J's have dots.
Well,
too.
right is right. So, and I'm just saying that only to offend people.
That's going to be a short that goes out.
Yeah, so everybody's clicked off now. But I will say this, just keep this in mind as we're making this conversation and talking about offense. And part of what we're going to be talking about is our present culture as well. And I will say, making comments on culture is not necessarily political. It is not taking a political side. It is just reflecting back what culture is showing.
Yeah,
so.
I think I like that you're saying that, because there's a danger when we enter meaningful and deep conversations about what typically would have been considered theological or even philosophical conversations. We've really reduced it to a lot of conversations down to their political, policy oriented ideologies. And one of the big things about if you've studied the gospel long enough, and you study mission especially, what's really important for me is to remember that the gospel critiques every culture and corrects every culture, including our own. We're not the wholly perfect culture either. And so it's just that we're going to allow that gospel to kind of integrate and challenge our thinking as it comes to all kinds of different subjects. And that might feel offensive at some level. But what level?
I always ask people, when you're in some kind of exchange of ideas, what is your knowing your own intentions for why you're in that conversation are important. Are you interested in an exchange of ideas to discover something that you might persuade someone to be true, or you believe something is true? Are you advocating for it, or are you actually just cajoling and coercing people into your position and are mad and angry that people don't hold it? And that goes for left, right, whatever your opinion is. The question is, do you actually believe the person on the other end can have a conversation with you? Are you out to a point of truth, even if you disagreement, because you're looking for an object, you're looking for something that might be true? And in the exchange of ideas, you start to realize, okay, I need to strengthen my argument here or give it up there. But if you're interested in our modern culture is just to shame you into my position, then how strong is your position that it can't withstand being questioned or concerned? And so that's my thing. The modern culture doesn't feel a need, and a lot of the things I've seen on both sides, to go back to the original idea of idea exchange, which is to discover something that might be true, or strengthen your position that's true, or persuade someone towards a truth, or have an open conversation about even speculating what might be true, in order to come to some kind of agreement, not to just oppose the other person and bash them down. And I think that's what makes people. I just stop and then go, wait, are you interested in exchanging ideas, or are you just mad at me? One is not the same as the other.
I've discovered in myself, we've had some I've had heated conversations with both of you guys
Here?
over the years. Not online, not
Maybe
on,
a little bit.
maybe, but I mean, I can get fairly passionate about things. You guys poke me for theology, like I said, which is always fun.
That was my favorite part of the sermon.
But I can think of times where like, okay, like we'll be talking and something will be brought up and I get upset. I'm actually not angry at the argument. Like that's one of the things is like sometimes we will, if we're not careful with our own hearts, you can get passionate and angry about
like a proxy argument, something else?
No, for example, I'll just use one that you and I got into a long time ago. I think we were talking about something in Genesis and we were discussing, something about
the phrase in the first passage.
Something like that. And one of the things that I realized was going on was I felt like, I've studied all this stuff for so long and there's so many options out there and you're just picking an option. And it's like, and so for me, I was feeling like, oh, wait a minute. What I realized wasn't the argument that I was frustrated with. I was frustrated with the fact that I was internally being arrogant and proud that I know this better than you. You don't get to have an opinion that solidly because I don't have an opinion that solidly. And so it was like, wow, I'm actually not having an argument at all. I'm having an internal dialogue I'm not aware of that's causing my emotions to come out. And that's so critical because you had no intention of insulting me. You have no intention of you just wanted to kind of
talk to somebody about
state what the scholar had said that you were really persuaded by, and that's really kind of all it was. But man, we can so easily get deceived by our own selves in the midst of a disagreement or in the midst of a conversation.
And I would say, that is in us, and we do have to be aware of our emotions and get control over our emotions. Because just like what you said too, one of the things you said in your sermon is, we need to deal with offenses, whether they're legitimate or not, with gentleness and respect, right? And I will say that is difficult to do, as you were just stating. Sometimes you don't even know why you're so worked up, but you're worked up. And I remember when my daughter Alyssa was growing up and she was a teenager, and I used to tell Nancy, okay, because we used to have pretty deep conversations all the time, and I used to tell Nancy, okay, this time I'm not going to really say anything. I'm just going to ask her a question, and I really just want to hear her feedback and get her response. And then next thing I know, we're in an argument. And, and I'm just like, dang it, I did what I didn't want to do again, And part of that is me and Alyssa are too much alike a lot of time, a lot of areas. But it's like, even when you're going into it with the idea that, hey, I know that I need to just be kind and gentle and patient and listen. Sometimes our emotions don't allow us to do that. You know? And it does come with training and discipline and then also eating crow when you come back and go, I'm sorry, I was wrong in the way that I dealt with that. And
we'll have an entire sermon on how to eat crow. Maybe I should even name it that. Put a title.
Barbecue crow.
I always think of the Ezekiel passage where he's like, it's going to be burning inside of you, and if you don't say it to somebody, it's like, that whole like, I've got to say this.
Yeah. But we've also just again become a culture that not only is constantly offended, looking for opportunities, I feel, to be offended when you have no reason to be offended, but also absolutely terrified of offending someone. So we walk on eggshells. We don't have conversations. We don't do things because we live in this cycle of fear. What say you?
I'm curious on a side note, just like, because you bring something up, do you think we can get addicted to being offended?
Well, I think we have a whole economy based on offense. Like there are people
and
that
victimhood, right?
Well,
which is probably that offense.
It's just the clickbait that you listen to online. What they've done is they've with the algorithm figured out what offends people to get them to click. So they put that in the title head, and then they don't care if the story's accurate. They're just trying to sell advertisements. So I literally think there's an economy of people that trying to get you from your own pattern. They watch what you watch on your internet, what you're reading, and they go, oh, well, this will get this guy's response. They don't care if it's positive or negative. They know if they send you this article, you'll click on it and you'll see the advertisement, and that's all it is.
And there is no story in the article
there may not
half
even
the time.
be anything in the article. It's just that's how the algorithm works.
I had clickbait all the time. It's like because I'm a Steelers fan, and it's like you read something, and it's like Mike Tomlin is getting fired at the end of the season, and you're like,
Is that
oh my
true?
gosh,
It's like a question mark.
Yeah, and you're looking, going,
Yeah.
that's crazy, and then you look, and there's like the article says nothing, and it's like, all right,
They got you.
They got me.
And this is and I'm not into conspiracy theories. This is just how algorithms work. Someone wants to generate a certain amount of revenue based on how many clicks something gets. So they put their advertisement monies in, and then they keep a data on your ability to click on things. And so you're being manipulated by advertisements all the time. It's just gotten more sophisticated.
I am not into conspiracy theories either, because generally speaking, conspiracy theories are wackadoodles that are always suspect of something that never comes true. No, I'm not into conspiracy theories. I am always right when I question the government or things.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
Ooh.
Just kidding. Whatever. Yeah. just whatever. No, just kidding.
By just being aware that we live in a culture that I don't think we realize the full social impact of what television and all these things kind of do to get us to get in our emotions. Because like with the kids in the car, the commercials say, "You need this product," and I'll be like, Who are you to tell me what I need? And the kids laugh because I'm talking to the commercial. But some people just kind of, if you listen to like 500 of those a week, that's going to affect your mood.
Now, I know somebody who actually starts getting mad at the commercials now for that fact. So it's like, okay, you shouldn't be offended at the commercial. The commercial's not trying to offend you.
Make a joke out of it. It's just like just funny to bring light to how many things are trying to control the way you feel about something.
Okay. And I feel like I got to remind people over and over and again to just cool the temperature. When we talk about things, it may sound political or we're taking a political side. We are not. We are just observing society.
Clickbait works both ways.
So again, going back to what I was saying about, everybody's offended, everybody's looking to be offended, everybody's afraid of offending anybody to the point that, they have these safe spaces for people to go into where they are offense-free zones, right? And you can only have certain language in there. And so in one sense,
actually, I think
you're not allowed in there if you have a different point of view, or it's just this safe space where nobody can say anything negative. And again, I think that we have gotten we try to anesthetize offense, so to the point that we are incapable of dealing with it, and we should, in one sense, embrace the idea of being offended, in the sense that, and I don't mean embrace it like, "Ooh, I like to be offended," but understanding I am going to be offended. There are going to be things that happen that are offensive, that offend me in certain ways. So it's part of that too, and I don't, and if it's a future sermon, then just shut me down and we'll move on. But how do we deal with offenses? Like, to me, again, because I'm apathetic, I guess, according to that chart, I don't seem to get offended very easily. But also, I feel like if people do something that offends me and it is unintentional offense, I don't really have a lot of problem with it, where it keeps me up. If it's intentional, like, they're trying to harm you or, emotionally, or offend you on purpose to hurt you, it's a little harder to deal with that, and then I get more angry. But how do we deal with different types of offenses that come our way?
I mean, we will really hit that heavily next week.
Okay.
That's actually the question of the next sermon. I guess for a little preview sense of that, it's like, I think you should take, like, there's two groups of people I'm seeing out there, and I'm like waiting for two different sermons to address the two different people. So like, I know some people who are like, that kid who's sitting there and just, you guys are on the Kicks commercial and I'm Mikey and I'm just, Mikey likes it. It's like people like being offended and they get engaged with offense and they take everything. There are certain personality types lend themselves.
The disagreeability.
Yeah, to that. The high disagreeable tend to lend themselves towards wanting to step up and stand up and make a big push. And so everything can be offensive to them. They got to fight every battle in every place in every way. And then there's another group of people who, a little bit like you, is like, nothing offends me. In fact, you're ignoring things that are evil that you should be upset about. And you're ignoring things. Like we can become that kind of a person who's literally, and you'll see it like, and I'm going to probably offend women's groups, but that's okay because I don't see this happening in men's groups very often. It can, but in a lot of women's groups, I've been to them, and they'll have somebody literally confess a sin or say, I'm just really struggling with this, and inevitably somebody will say, no, you're not really, and they will then deny the confession, deny the situation out of an attempt to not allow the offense that this person is trying to.
They don't want them to feel bad.
Right. And if being offended and feeling an offense is going to feel bad, and it's part of the apparatus God gave us. That's why I tried to explain that, when I talk about apathy, irritation, anger to outrage, I'm not talking about sinful states of like we all think of them as like screaming and yelling. No. Anger is a true emotion that's to energize you. Outrage is the height of that emotion to motivate you at the maximum to do something.
There is a difference between anger and expressing anger.
Right. Outrage and expressing that outrage in a wrong manner. Right. And so, I think they're going to be these things that offend us, and the way you got to deal with them is you're going to have to take responsibility, and that's where we'll go next week. And so I'll kind of leave it there because I don't want to go off on the message that I'm going to go off on next week, and gives a little bit of suspense. You guys want to come back for the message, so it's good stuff. But yeah. I do feel like we as a society have lost control of how we respond to offenses or perceived offenses. Like you put that HOA shirt, on the pulpit and saying that that's going to offend people. Which some people will laugh, some people see the humor in it, some people get offended. I had a guy talk to me for 20 minutes after about how he's on an HOA and been on an HOA and why he doesn't like them, but he knows why they're really important. And you got to understand when people do these things, you got to have somebody get in the way. I'm like, no, you go talk to them. You go handle the pool. I'll talk to my neighbor. I'm a big boy. I don't need some proxy organization to take my money and use my security guards to spy on me about whether or not I'm doing something they think is going to offend my neighbor or not. Yeah. I'm sorry. Do I have an opinion about this?
Yeah.
But I will say, with HOAs, you drive down some neighborhoods and you go, oh yeah, they don't have an HOA. So yeah,
I go, wow, look at the value of those houses. They're going up.
That's true in California.
But quarterback loses a game and then he's getting death threats at his house and signs on his yard, and it's
you need the HOA to defend them.
It is crazy, yeah.
Unless the HOA is sending the threats.
And
well, there's something like when people hear something they don't like. What I'm always curious is why does that trigger your emotions to the degree that it does? Because part of it is something like you're talking about. It hit a value. It hits something that you value, or something that you think might possibly be true that you have to shut down. Like if someone comes to me and they don't know me and they say a bunch of lies about me, I don't know how much I'm going to care about that, because who are you? How much power do you have over my life? What are you saying that is actually that I would even agree to be close to being true? But it's when someone comes up to you and knows your life and examines it, says something, I'm going to put more weight on that than I am other things. But if every little person that walks along and says something to you gets your emotion, it's really giving away your ability to cope and have power and have a grounding. Everyone else is controlling you. You're not actually controlling yourself. You're not protecting yourself. You're actually vulnerable to everyone's response to you. And so if they don't respond to you in a certain way, then you will be screaming and angry and it'll mess up your day. And I was just like, wow, you have to have some kind of centering mechanism. This is why, to me, Christianity is the thing that does that. It's like, God, is that true? No, yes, I can talk to my brothers and sisters. There's this mechanism of the church. There's this mechanism of the scriptures telling you how to examine your heart, that you have a process. I don't know what you do if you don't have that process. I don't know. You'd have to just have some kind of grounding and objectivity in order to get through it. Because I think, you would have to defend yourself, or you wouldn't know what was true. And so maybe it is true about me. And so I got to make sure that person doesn't get to me. That's an insane place to live.
This might be a little philosophically wonky, but I think that what we've seen is the outcome that philosophers have been talking about for at least 30 years now in Christian. And it's why in philosophy departments, postmodernism is dead. is because it's called the grounding problem. That's what you're bringing up. Like you can believe you exist, but what are you going to ground existence in? You can believe that certain things happen,
or just or unjust,
right,
or whatever you believe is good or not good.
All humans have human rights. Okay,
who told you that?
Who says?
Yeah.
Oh, we say. We agreed.
Who's
who
we?
Said, who's the question is, who said that was right? We did. Well, now you're in a very tight little circle of a contradiction. Like you can't just say we said it, so it's true. That's because now, if one person you say that we said it, so it's true, and so if we all say that what we individually believe is true, then it's all true. Well, now you've fallen into total relativism, and that's what we have. We have an absolute relativistic culture where everyone is God, and so when everyone is God,
there's no standard.
There's a standard.
There's a million standards.
I make my standard, and the standard is me. And if you disagree with me, or you say something I don't agree with, oh my gosh, I am offended to the level of sin. And why? Because everything's a sin against you and your God, and everything's an injustice. Therefore, you're actually going to be more outraged about the injustices, which are not like a disagreement thing, and you're not going to be able to handle anything. And at that point, your life is going to be a very difficult one, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I mean, just that whole idea that just because everybody says it's true is not fact. Because, I mean, just coming off the holidays, everybody says green bean casserole is really good. No, it's not. It's gross. I don't like it. So,
Are you defining green bean casserole relativistically? Like what's one green bean casserole to another? Or is there an objective green bean casserole?
I think there's a standard that's out there that's on the recipe from those crispy fried onion things that just everybody follows, because it all pretty much looks the same to me.
This is a matter, though, of philosophy in a weird way. I mean, this is a conversation philosophy they call matters of taste versus matters of truth. So, like, if I like strawberry ice cream and you like vanilla ice cream, was one of us right and wrong? Well, the fact is we both have different likes, but the question is which one's better? Well, it depends on what you use to measure better. You can measure health. That's a way. But there are some things where there's no way to find that kind of a truth. But there is
the truth is ice cream is good. So
there is
the general truth.
So we're talking about matters of taste. We're talking about things that you can't really draw a line on because they're about our experiences with them. The problem is there are things in life that you can draw our experiences on. Like if we did want to say which one's more healthy, there is a strong scientific argument. They're probably both bad for us, depending on the volume that you eat. Which one is healthier? If I'm allergic to bananas, that's going to be different.
And bad for us compared to what?
Compared to what is a natural standard healthy diet for a
ice cream
human?
compared to a candy bar.
Yeah.
Ice cream's going to win every time, but ice
being
cream
more healthy, right?
Right, being more healthy. But again, so matters of taste. And then it's relative to the question in that sense. And I do think that, and I'm not saying relativity, like everything's relative. It's like, no, it's relative to the question. It's objective to the individual. But look, if you need insulin, that's not a matter of taste.
Right.
That's a matter of just, you have to have that.
Objective reality would say.
If somebody's going into a diabetic shock and you're like, give them ice cream. How'd that go? They need insulin. They don't need ice cream.
Well, no one does this with things that really matter to them, their personal life. I mean, very few people do. If someone says, I feel you should drive backwards on the freeway, and I think it's the right thing to do, you wouldn't just go driving on the freeway. You'd find out that reality isn't the right thing or good thing for your body to do because of the reality of it. So people don't have those kind of opinions. But I think what people try to do is they want all of the things that they want to do, what we do as people, to be matters of taste, because that means that I can choose. They think that's more free. And I'm saying, no, it's actually more dangerous. If something is objectively true, it's better for you to live in that reality than to think it's just a matter of feeling or opinion. And so when it comes to God, people will say, well, you like God and they like Buddha, and so it's all a matter of bananas and strawberry ice cream. No, if there's a real God, it's an objective reality that will affect your life. And so these are matters of truth. And everyone who's religious, typically, most religions, think they're arguing over what's true, not what's the best flavor. So when I talk to someone, I'm like, No, I objectively believe this is true. It's not a matter of my feelings or my perceptions only.
Which means you're wrong.
Yeah. And so it's weird that one of us, whether we like it or not, is going to be wrong about whether God is real or not.
Or both of us could be wrong because we might have the wrong God.
Yeah.
So.
And so that's what I'm talking about. And people go, well, you can't know these things. And I'll be like, well, who said that? You know what I mean? And so the idea that you can't know something because it's difficult, that's not true either. So you have to argue for that as well. And so I'm just trying to say, like, in a world where people don't want to have these conversations anymore because they hurt your brain or they hurt your heart, that's why people yell and scream, because it's getting frustrating, and you have to think through them and feel through them and deal with these things and find out an answer to live by.
And it goes back to my unfortunate discovery of my own heart, right? When I feel like I can't, I'm going to resort to anger. And logically, we would call it a fallacy, where you're attacking the individual, and ad hominem. When you attack the person, it's easier. Well, guess what? If everybody's God, every attack,
shut down the devil.
Every attack is an ad hominem.
Yeah,
because you're God. And so literally everyone's feeling abused by everyone else when they think that they're God. And so you need God, the real God, at least an objective being who is God, at the center. And you may be, honestly, this is one of the reasons I'm like, Islam should have a little bit more oomph to themselves, because if they think their God is objectively true, like that's why I said we don't need to be offended by by all these other people's sins, because God is objectively true, and Yahweh is the real God who defends himself for real. I don't need to defend Yahweh. He'll do it. Not all the time. Now, does that mean I don't need to have answers, or I don't need to have reasons for the things that I believe and that I trust? Obviously, we have reasons to trust things, and so I have lots of them. And I've tried to, and I'm not opposed to somebody sharing with me their reasons they believe in, whether it's Mormonism or Islam or Judaism or Hinduism or whatever. I've read lots of arguments for why they believe that they're correct.
Yeah.
But there should be a good conversation and attempting to get to the truth.
Yeah, this is the same with Christianity, though. I know a lot of Christians who grow up in the church but never actually question whether what they believe about God is true. And so they're almost afraid to do that, because they might find out in their mind something might stumble them and they don't belong. It's true. I would say your faith is really weak at that point. You should learn about what you believe. You should be used to questioning. And if you're cutting off the questions, then the question is, how firm is that belief? How reliable is that belief to your life? And that's the model the whole world has decided to follow. I don't know, I'm just going to fight. And if I fight and I win, then I must be right. And if everybody agrees with me, then we're in the majority, and that must mean I'm right. I'm like, that is a terrible way. What if you're wrong? And you hurt a lot of people in the process.
Yeah, and I always, I truly believe that it's as important, if not more important, to understand why you believe something to be true than to just believe something is true. And part of that is, I feel like the foundations of what you believe is much stronger. And I think that also it gives you that clarity of why this makes sense to you, and if something makes sense to you, then it's a stronger belief. But Greg, you were talking about our hearts and everything else, and we've talked about in different ways, how our hearts can keep us off tilt, and keeping us off the right direction. And you brought up something in the sermon talking about I should be more concerned about my offenses than I should about injustices. And we have somebody that wrote in a question that kind of goes along the lines. It says, if I am to be more concerned about my own offenses, what do I do about injustices?
Yeah, clarification, I didn't say that, you should be concerned more about your own offenses than injustices. And this is important for me to say that. Like, my actual point was we should be we should be most offended about our own sins. And the reason I say that is because our own sins are injustices. Ultimately, all injustice begins in the human heart. It's every injustice needs to first be defined rightly, because all injustice injustice isn't what we want it to be. Injustice isn't like, I think that's unjust and therefore I get to throw the word just behind it or justice behind it, and now I have purple justice. Like I'm so angry that everybody hates Barney, so I want purple justice.
Or confusing something being unfair with being unjust.
Right, and unfairness is a portion of a conversation in justice.
Yeah,
but it is not the same thing. And so what's hard is to realize that all injustice needs to come down to the line of sin. It really does.
Yeah.
I think of injustice as an institutionalized sin.
Or just a socialized sin, or some kind of a group of people.
That's what it's somehow it's socialized, institutionalized, different thoughts. One is very clear, it's got like the law behind it, or it's got some kind of organization power behind it.
It's related
Social
to people.
hegemonies are also another form of that, but that's more or less agreed upon. It's like you don't have to you just do it because that's what everybody does. Like you're driving, like if somebody got out of their car, got into their car and decided all day they're just going to drive backwards in the right direction. Yeah, they may be going only 15 miles an hour, but it's like, we got to pull you over. You can't do that. Why? Well, we've turned that into an institutionalized reason, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can if you want. Why would you do it? I don't know. It's not as safe. Forklift drivers drive that way, but because that's how their wheels work. But
they're not allowed on the freeway,
right? And so the point here is that institutionalized or socialized sin is this kind of agreement of human beings who have sinned in the same way working together. And so like we'll take an example of like somebody they were bringing up that they had seen the movie Sound of Freedom, and they were talking about like the sex slave trade. Yeah, I have seen it.
I got to watch that still.
Me too.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's well made. It's unfortunately there's some stuff that's happened in the background, but the idea behind it is very good at waking you up to, hey,
social injustice
this is a massive issue of child sex trafficking and stuff like this. And it's sinister. And guess what? It's housed here in Southern California. It's like one of the major hubs of the world. And so, like, the question that we have to ask ourselves is like, are we participating in it? And you're like, well, no, I hate that stuff. And it's like, well, okay, what kind of magazines are you buying? What kind of websites are you going to? Like, you can literally engage in this by viewing pornography, soft porn, modeling, all that stuff works with this group out there. And so we may say we're against it, but we may end up being unknowingly endorsing it. Sort of like slave labor. Like, man, I've got all these devices and I'm unknowingly engaging in it. And so what's difficult about global injustices and these kinds of things is that they become so amorphous. All you can do is like yell at it online or post some swear or something.
To do, yeah.
Right. Because really you feel like, I don't know what else I can do. And the answer really is to continue to spread the gospel so that we see our own personal sin and we stop sinning. Like when we stop trying to offend God and we do our best we can to resolve all the offenses that we're been involved with. And I think that's why I really say, like, man, you want to start dealing with injustice, begin with the injustice in your heart. Begin with the injustice that's found inside of you, and that offends God. And then you're going to start to discover what I think is more like calling, like other things that you need to fight against that are locally. And it starts local. It may be right there in your city or your HOA, or it may be in a club or a group or your church or you name it. But injustice starts in the heart and it goes out and it works its way out locally, and then you can start making effect. Like that's the best I can really engage with it.
The other one is like, who defines social offense? What does it look like? And I do think where the Bible comes in clear, because the Bible has a lot to say about groups that are like that. You have to make a case. You can't just think something is bad because you think it's bad. You have to actually line it up with your worldview as a Christian. You have to line it up with how God wants you to treat other people. And then you have to ask, what is your particular responsibility to this group and where's God placed you? Because there's all kinds of injustices in the world. The question is, you're in a local body, you're in a local church. How can you support that situation if you're feeling drawn to those kind of issues? but also being informed and being part of the church process. So, but the Bible does say that you need to examine yourself in that area. And I would say that if you're going to help in an injustice area, it is worth examining your own heart to see, do I hate the people group? Because if you're trying to stop something or reach a people group or stop an injustice, you can do another harm on top of it just because of your anger. You can bias, you can attack someone you think is in that category that isn't. You have to still be very cautious of what you're doing, because you can actually do harm even trying to do good if you don't check your heart. And I have seen that with people. They've done studies on people, I think it was called the Milgram experiment, where they put these people in protected, say that they're in prison and the other people are watching them, and these people start abusing them at, like, doing little things in the experiment. So then they switched the groups. So then that people group that was upset was hurting the other people group almost as an act of revenge. And no one was saying, like, we should treat each other a certain way. But we find out when we switch the tables on people and we give people power, sometimes we're looking for revenge. We're not looking to bring people up to the level of how we should treat each other and bring about the best good even in our enemies. We're actually wanting to destroy our enemies. And I think that's a motive that you always have to check if you care about justice, because there's a righteous indignation can quickly turn to self-righteousness really quickly. And that's why they talk about in social work and things, God complexes, where you think you're the only person that can save someone, that you're responsible for all of the evils of the world. And you do have limited resources, and you do have to work with people. So that's why I think the institution of the church is, through the gospel, is the best means to change both individual and social issues.
Not to mention, I think it's really critically important for us to make it very clear that, like, you have to check the offenses from your heart first, because if you're not honest with those and you do end up trying to do something, fight something, you may actually end up be somebody who's hiding the very offenses by looking like you're doing good. I mean, we kind of talked about that a little bit. I think you've said you've seen some of that in some spaces.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing that they, the reason why in counseling or any kind of public trust where someone is giving you, you're helping people, or if you're a doctor, you can get a bit of a God complex, because you can kind of think that you're the center of everybody's ills to help them in that, and that's another heart issue. But also, I've noticed in our culture that oftentimes some of the predators are pretty good at hiding their own behaviors and sins by doing good in another area. It kind of throws off a lot of speculation about a person's lifestyle. And that's why, if you are going to be a public figure, put yourself in that situation, you do have to have somebody in your life that's transparent.
And I hate to do this, but you mean like a group of great actors who all do some great things but have been on a particular list, and now see, don't look at the list over here because I'm a great actor or whatever.
Yeah, or the assumption that
or you see the movies where the guy is a corrupt guy and he's very generous with the local police department,
or gangsters,
and so
do
that
this.
they always look the other way whenever he's in trouble, and everybody's like, he's a hero. And
well, people don't understand. Like, I grew up in a gang neighborhood. People go, why would anybody follow a gang? I'll tell you, if you're a single mom and someone's harassing you and you have gang friends, they are going to take care of that issue for you, and the police may not. And so it starts with, I'll do some good so I can do some bad. And that's how a gang becomes popular in a neighborhood. They literally care for the neighborhood sometimes better than anyone else. And just think, just because someone's doing a good doesn't mean that you excuse the bad. That's why it's hard to be a Christian, because you have to call out your own sin and in the sins of the ones you love, because you don't want them to fall into temptation and thinking, oh, I'm just in a tribe now.
Well, and because the church is supposed to be the one institution that God's provided to the world that does the good for the good. That we're not doing good to hide some other bad or evil.
No, or to get rid of one in my heart.
Yeah, and the world's always going to think we're doing that because that is the nature of humanity. And so they're going to view our evangelism as, maybe that's colonialism, or maybe missions is actually trying to disrupt and destroy a culture and their native. I get it. There's these, but to me, that is, again, looking at like that's if you were just a human being without God actually having invested the answer to the world. Well, of course, you're going to try to figure out the most sinister take on it. We're cynics in that sense. So
yeah, just asking yourself, the reason why I think things like fasting or things like just doing good and going, I want to just please God, changes a person, is because people don't understand that. Most people do things because they get something. Most people even have kids because they want somebody that looks like them that they can love on, and that it's their. So even though there's a lot of selflessness, there's this mixed motive, and the only thing I think that can cure that in the human heart is to have a God where you just please Him, and then He takes care of whatever happens to you. Then you're fine to be like, okay, I can love because I was freely loved. And I don't know how else you do that unless you have some kind of sense that's similar to that in your common grace. Because I just think you can make an argument that everybody's doing things for the most part apart from God, out of their own selfishness. And Christians are tempted to do that as well. So it is a part of the human condition. So
you were saying that, you feel like people nowadays have become their own God, and that's why we are all offended all the time.
I don't think people think they have.
Yeah.
I don't think they would think of it that way, but that's philosophically kind of what's gone on.
And it's just really just turned into a narcissistic,
idol.
So I mean, this
Narcissa.
isn't new.
Narcissa
This
is a
isn't new, right?
god.
I mean, going all the way back to Adam and Eve, they wanted to be like God, and that started the whole problem. But it does seem like it's reached a pinnacle point. How much of that is just we're more aware of stuff in our culture now, or how much of it is this removal of offense in people's lives, and we've coddled and told everybody they're perfect and they're the greatest and they're the best, and we don't let kids get hurt anymore on playgrounds. I mean, back in the day, the kid on the monkey bars, he falls down, starts crying. Dad's like, come on, get up, rub some dirt on it and try it again. And now it's like, Dad catches them and,
the
my
playground's
baby.
made out of Nerf.
And so it's just like, there is no pain, that we're comfortable with. There is no offense that we're comfortable with. And everybody is so narcissistic with their social media and everything. So
it's the question of our age, isn't it? It's really like there's been a lot of. I mean, I think
is it the cart or the horse?
Yeah, it's like what's his name? Truman.
Capote?
No, Carl Truman.
Carl Truman's has written a whole book trying to kind of unpack how we got to the situation where we're at. Most people all have to agree that when you sit there and you stare at yourself and you stare at people asking you to like them, and you're out all the time for getting somebody just to like. I mean, the concept that we picked a like. It's like. Ooh.
And by the way, please like us on Facebook when you see a little clip. Subscribe and review, like us on YouTube
because we're we want to be part of that narcissistic culture. But it's something obviously you can't escape. And when you have, all kids wanted to be Hollywood stars when they were little. Now they want to be YouTube stars, and they want to be social media stars, TikTok stars. You're just like
influencers,
right? Influencers. It's just kind of like, well, yeah, obviously it's going to be about. We're naturally, as young kids, focused on ourselves. We're going to be kind of in that zone. I think what's gone on is that there's been a lowering, like the idea of God being. I'm going to just say, look, our education ignores God. Most people who are being educated in the United States are not gaining any kind of concept about God or gaining any concept about how he integrates into knowledge and life, so that you go into a science class and it's not so much that they tell you there is no God. They just ignore the whole thing. Like it has nothing to do with science or the design that you're looking at or any of these things. You go into a literature course, and you're not going to read, you're going to ignore where the King James Version and through Shakespeare has influenced almost every arc of every book in Western literature. We're just going to ignore that. We're not going to even bring that up. We're going to show you sinners in the hands of an angry God. Oh, there we go. Now we're talking about God. He's angry. And that's about as far as any kid ever really gets, is reading the title. So and then thinking
even
otherwise.
If they bring it up at all now.
Right. And so I think that there's this natural bend away from thinking like, well, yeah, there's no God. And then when you suddenly you are the centerpiece, you are the I think it's a sinister setup by the demonic.
Sinister plot.
I mean, I do think that the demonic knows what they're doing with us.
Sure.
And I think that they used a very powerful tool that can be used for good, and it was very quickly used for naught. And we are in a situation where, we are far more narcissistic and far more concerned with our own opinions and far more offended than ever. And when we're offended, we build these walls and we want to stay in our echo chambers because I'm offended by what you believe on the other side of that wall. And guess what? It's already started to happen within the walls. So if you want to just consider like, hey, we built these giant walls up against liberal and conservative, If you'll look at the movements right now in the liberal world, there's a giant wall being built between the progressives and the liberals, and on the other side, you've got these walls being built by the populists and the
neocons
and the conservatives, and then you've got also the libertarians, and so. And guess what's going to happen in there? They're all going to subdivide again even further because we don't have anything that centers us any longer. If God is not the center of the worldview and the education and the modern conscience of the consciousness of our society, there are no rules but the rules we make in our groups and our tribes. And those tribes will devolve down to the individual. And then that's why anybody can be anything they want with any pronoun they want, and we can have a billion different
create your own
genders.
reality.
And VR is going to expand that. You're going to have all kinds of things that are coming that are just going to continue to defrag this reality of the West because it was based on a Christian center point. And when God is removed from the center point, there are no standards, there's no realities. Philosophy does not hold.
I think it's good to ask yourself too, in any rule, if you got everything that you wanted about the things about reality, would life really be good or would you just be miserable? Because it seems to me that when people do get everything their way, there's still a part of you knows this isn't right, this isn't true because it's coming from me, how do I know? And so I have seen people just completely fall apart because they know deep down inside, I think we all know that like there's something off with the way I'm able to judge things more accurately. There's got to be something that says, okay, you're doing well, because people are constantly looking for this need for approval. And if it's not coming from within and you need it from without to affirm what's within, it's telling you you're not designed to figure that out inside of yourself.
Well, it's also the fact that there's a lot of, I'm not doing anything wrong. Like you can point out a wrong at people and they have every reason why they chose what they chose. And this is why I chose it. That doesn't make it a good either. That doesn't make it good. That doesn't mean your decision was the right decision.
Yeah.
It's still a bad decision.
Well, I think even in the church, but even outside the church, we live in our feelings, and people often look for information to approve of their feelings. And I think once people go against what they feel to be true, so how do you reconcile the feelings and the thoughts? Like how do I know if I'm thinking this is right or wrong that it is? And what do I do with my feelings when someone is offending me? Like how do I know what to do? And you may be talking about this in the series. Like how do I process that? How do I know like, oh, this seems wrong. This seems unjust. What do we do?
I think that using the diagram I gave should begin to help. I mean, if it's like categorize as a disagreement.
So those that weren't in the service, where would they find that diagram?
Or you can probably describe it, because what's in the center?
Yeah, it's just basically 3 concentric circles that the center is God, or what should be for a Christian. It's really at the center is your core, what you would
whatever
think
it is your
is
God
the most valuable thing, an idol, yourself, God, something like that. And so the surrounding circle there, we would define that line that crosses into the greatest offense where you'd be outraged as sin. And so because that is the greatest offense in any situation with the most valuable. You've sinned against the most valuable thing there. Now, if it is not God, you're going to have to defend that. And so what I said is offense is when your core needs to be defended. So an offense is when your core needs defense. And so there is this natural feeling that I got to fight back. And that means you've been hit somewhere deep in that zone. Now, the next zone out is another circle, and that zone, you're going to get angry. What I mean by that is you're energized enough, you're going to do something about it. But I really think put like in here like slights. These are things that are a little bit more personal. They're going to be more very clearly attacking like you as a person. Maybe it's your character, your integrity, your children, something about your value system that feels offensive. But really, it could just be an opinion somebody has.
Yeah.
They're not really sinning against you. They just think your kid's weird or something, right? So, how dare you think my kid is weird? It's like, no, sometimes people think kids are weird, and that's a weird thing, whatever. So, and then the third circle out, which really is kind of like, it should be an irritant. What I mean by that is that it's going to motivate you at some level. You're going to feel energized by it. But it's not like you're not outraged, and I really don't think you should be. And I call that disagreements, like where opinions are really literally being battered back and forth, like we're doing here.
Yeah.
When we disagree with each other, we're not going to be on each other over it and yelling and screaming. And then everything outside of that really is kind of what I mean by apathy. Is sometimes it's apathetic, sometimes it's just humorous, sometimes it's just, you're kind of like, there's that thing. It's kind of like, I don't get it. And so those zones are critical, I think, for helping people analyze like, oh, I'm really energized by this. Why? What's really going on? Because I guarantee you could dig back, you'll find some kind of sin in there, either that you've committed or been committed to you. Like I dig back and I'm like, I'm really upset about this disagreement. What's going on? Well, it's not the disagreement that I'm upset about. It's
the devaluing.
It's the devaluing thing. It's inside of me that I think I'm being sinned against, which wasn't true. And therefore, speaking it out loud and realizing, oh, this is a me offending myself thing. Well, I can now drop it and go back into the conversation. That takes a lot of emotional attention in the moment. Yeah, a lot of marriages get into this mess.
Well, this is my problem, though. In psychology, the hard thing is you're thinking about your feelings. You're feeling and you don't even know why you're thinking that way. You know what I mean? And so I really don't think these are separate as much as we like to separate thoughts from feelings. The ones that we think the most about are the things that have stirred us the most. People are like, well, why do you do so much math? Well, because you love it. It's love. It's an affection that it draws you towards it if you like math. So like your feelings and your thoughts are always matched up. So it is good to have a process. So that's why I like the circles, is it at least gives people, start this process. Start questioning your own reasoning and thoughts to line up with Scripture. And when you're triggered like this, especially with someone you love, I mean, we kind of do this already. A healthy relationship is this, I think. You're like mad and you're trying to explore why. I don't even know why I'm mad. I'm just really mad. Something you said ticked me off, and I'm trying to figure out what that is. I'm taking ownership of my feelings, but there may be a value thing, and it might be something that, did they intend to do that? Did they not?
Right.
This is the nature of how humans should resolve conflict, but I think we've lost that art and that ability because we're just going on the first instinct.
Well, and we don't know we don't have a definition of what a sin is. And when you don't have a definition of what a sin is, if you can't label it, you can't deal with it. I mean, it's just part of reality. I mean, half of your living life growing up as a little kid is learning what things are. I used to hold my daughter in front of our refrigerator, and she was like not even 2 yet, completely, like just this little kid, and she's just like, "What's that?" And she'd just say it all the time. What's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? And I'd answer what it was.
And then you would open the freezer and go, stick your tongue on the shelf.
No.
Oh.
No, so I held her. I was holding her in front of this, and I was just like, okay. And so I just started naming everything on the refrigerator. This and this, and this is a magnet, and this is a dog, and this is this, and this is that, and that's a handle, and this is and then I go, okay. And she goes, fix the one. She goes, what's that? And the one thing I didn't point at. Because we need to be able to label something in order to understand something. And when we can't label what an offense looks like, you're not going to handle it. You're not going to be able to really deal with it. You're just got this marshmallow like goo of emotions running all over the place that need boundaries. The human experience is most free within boundaries, not outside. And when we try to throw off every boundary, we create like psychologically, chaotically broken human beings, and I think that's the core center of what's really happening in our culture.
And you know, just so everybody's aware, just because somebody has a different opinion than you, it should not offend you.
But go ahead and put it in the comments anyway.
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna get on to some questions, right? So we got a couple of questions to go over. So first off, we have a question from Nathaniel. All right, so he says, hello, everyone on the rabbit trail. I have some questions. Recently, I was reminded, and I think these are like two questions, right? Recently, I was reminded that God has a plan for everyone. So what about those who were taken early, whether it be through abortion or sickness or just died at an early age? What plan did he have for them? And then also the Pharisees worship Moses almost as much as God, it seems. Did they in some way consider him like a god? Throughout Jesus' time, they spoke of Moses as if he was some god, saying that they were breaking the laws of Moses, or asking him or John if they were Moses, and him being Jesus. Why would they treat Moses like that, even when they had documents saying that he was empowered by God, not a god? Also, I think you should do another live podcast. Thank you, Nate. And keep it up, Brent. Stay funny. Yeah, buddy. All right. So I really didn't care about the question.
Yeah, I know.
I just wanted to get down to that.
Hey,
Brent, stay funny. You know, that's what's important.
So
to me.
Because of that, You get to answer the question.
Well, I will say, okay, so God has a plan for everyone. What about those that were taken early? So I would say Jim, who was taken at the age of 12, his plan, God's plan for him was that he would die at the age of 12. So pretty easy, cut and dry right there.
Oh, okay. So that's it?
That's all I got.
Oh, okay. That was really morbid.
Yeah.
And disturbing.
And I do think, though, that, the idea that, okay, I know sometimes I feel like when people talk about God has a plan for your life and this is the path, gets very determinatory and
deterministic.
Yeah. And I know that the opposite side of that is like almost open theism. So I always feel like you got to kind of walk that beam carefully, so you're not getting heretical on either side. But I am not a determinist, and I am not an open theist. So this does bring a lot of tension to me in the question. Thank you, Nate.
This could open up a big can of worms, and I don't know how far you want to go down this particular rabbit hole, but this has to do with, I think, God's will. A perfect will. Do you think it's sovereign will, a moral will? Do you believe there's a will for one individual's life that always leads them to a good, or, so like you're talking about a baby, why did they die? Shouldn't they have lived and God allowed them to have a fruitful life? Why would God want that to happen? What is his will, right? I think it has a lot to do with how do you reconcile when bad things happen in life? Is that God's will or not? And so, and then when it comes to just like decisions in your life, moral will, like is when God says, I have a plan for your life. What does that mean? The word plan, does it mean a specific individual will, or is it a group will? Because we're talking about plurals and singulars. And then we're also talking about, is it have to do with his moral or his sovereign will? And I think that's the thing that a lot of times people get confused. I don't know what passage that probably riffs off of. What passage do you think that is? Do you think that's God has a plan for your life?
Well, this goes into some of the, so in theology, systematic theology, you're talking about the wills. That's, so the conversation.
How does one determine the will of God?
Well,
what is it?
There are layers to will, right? So we realize that there are scriptures that say God desires that none should perish. That's the term I'm looking for.
God is not willing that any should perish?
Yeah, try that translation. And the idea is that
Second Peter,
There is a
3:9
passage too that says that this is the perfect will of God. And
so there's this idea that God is not slow; he's patient towards you, not wishing that any should perish. So his desire isn't that people would die and go to hell, but
or people who don't even get to be born because they're aborted.
Right, people
go to heaven.
Die and go to hell, and so he doesn't desire that people would be, aborted, but people are aborted. So the question is like, okay, if God has a desire, and yet these things are happening, why? And so this leads backwards to how you think of God's sovereignty. Is God sovereign in such a way that he controls every detail, thus determinism? Or is he so hands-off that he doesn't even know what's going to happen, which would be open theism? And we'd have to say no to both of those. The Bible doesn't give us that right. And so there have been some arguments that have been made that, okay, there are different wills at which God has a desire for, like, that you would live to a certain age, but he knows that for his plan to work, that you're going to have to die at 12, right? And so what he does is he allows you to die at 12, though he doesn't plan you to die at 12. So that's one way people have gone about trying to explain this. He lifts his hand off and he allows the course of events to occur without controlling them to happen. And so that's one route when some people will take. Another route is that he sees all the free will choices of everyone who's ever chosen anything, and that though his ultimate will be accomplished, the ultimate good, and he knows that this is the world in which that good will be accomplished, and so he creates that world knowing full well, being certain, not making people make their choices, but he's certain that when he creates this world, that world will come about. and the outcome he's looking for will happen. So that's called a Molinist position. And so there's these different approaches to the idea. Now, God had a plan for their life. We can also say that given all circumstances, given all possible worlds, we could say God had an ideal plan for every single human's life. But given what his outcomes and that he has desired, and we being sinful, and the demonic existing, there is always going to be things that can't happen, even though he may, quote, desire them. And that gets into other aspects of will. So when we see that, though, note that I do think that children under a certain age, and those especially in Christian households under a certain age, all theologies say, let's just put it this way, all the theologies out there go, kids in Christian homes who die as babies, they're good to go, all of them, except for probably Catholicism. But
for some people,
you have to be baptized as a baby. So, there's other groups that say, no, there's an age in which you hit accountability, in which you come to understand that you're a sinner and you agree with it and you act within that sin. Now you've reached a stage of what we would call, you've left innocence into culpability, and now you're culpable and you're going to be judged for your sins. You need forgiveness in Christ. Some people put that at anywhere in the range of 8 to 14, right? I think probably.
Yeah, most
younger.
people,
So,
it's up to God to know what that would be.
God's perfect in his judgment. He knows exactly what he's doing there. So when a baby I think any baby who's aborted and these kinds of things, that God in his mercy has covered them with the blood of Christ. They're not saved because they're babies. They're saved because Jesus' blood applies to them, because God wants to. And so I don't have a problem with that. There's some cases where he just goes, you're mine.
Yeah.
And he can do that. I don't know why he can't, and cover over because they're innocent. So I do think he has a heart for the innocents. He has a heart for the innocent. And so he desires them. And you can see that in like the book of Jonah, where he's like, people don't know their right hand from their left, and there's a lot of cattle. It's like, I have a care and a heart for the innocent here. I don't want to just blow things up. I'm going to be patient. I want everybody to come to me. So I'm going to do everything I can. But that doesn't also mean that he's not allowing people to make their choices, or he knows exactly what choices they're going to make. And so he's allowed, because that's the world he's.
The other thing, though, is some people feel like if you pray hard enough or long enough, you'll know the plan for your individual life. And that depends on what you mean by the plan. And so to me, oftentimes, God had a plan for everyone's life, and you could know it at all times. And I don't know if the scriptures actually say that. To me, you always know God's moral will for any particular decision, in the sense that it's available to you through scripture, through reading, through prayer. But I don't know how much I agree that God is obligated to tell you his individual plan for your life.
No, I think it's a human illusion to believe that we can step back and know the plan for our life.
Our individual life.
And the reason I think it's a human illusion is you have so many choices that will bring that plan about. All you can do is know what God's will is in the choice that you have before you. And in some cases, that choice that you have before you, both choices
are good.
Pick Choose one and go. And you realize, regardless of what your choice is, God's always in charge of the outcome. You can choose the good and end up in a really desperately bad situation. And you can choose the bad, and God can be gracious and give you something good, because he's merciful. But God wants you to choose the good, and God's called us to choose the good. It is always God's will, always God's plan for our life, that we should choose the good. And that will lead you down interesting paths. I do think you can get to a place where you have a passion about a particular thing, and you're made in a certain way, that those things align. And as you choose the good, it will take you in a direction in life that, now we live in a very affluent society, so you can kind of pick the things you want to do.
You have more options than you would in the ancient world.
Yeah, in an ancient world, you just kind of lived the life that you were granted because your parents did that. And so
you didn't have a lot of upward mobility going on.
So it's a complicated.
It's important to me because it becomes a
but
personal issue at some point. Because I remember praying for like a year and a half, should I join the Air Force? And I kept praying, and I got no answer, no individual answer on should I do this thing. And I talked to a pastor who was really influential, and he just hit me aside and he just says, is joining the Air Force evil all of a sudden? And I was like, no. I was like, is your desire to be selfish? And he went through my reasoning for doing it. And he goes, well, if God's not answering you and it's not evil to do, then you get to choose what you think would please him the most.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, that helped open up my eyes because I think that's important. So
Yeah. So, and on the Moses thing, bottom line is, yeah, they kind of held Moses really, really high. He was a big deal because the law was so critically important. And he was the author of that. And in a way, they did kind of think of Moses as needing to come back because there were some other books out there. I believe I don't know if the Ascension of Moses, I know that's a book that was written at the time period, was pretty popular, like suggested maybe he was coming back, or Moses said he wasn't. So the Pharisees who longed and the scribes who loved the law, they really promoted Moses. They really thought, they called it the seed of Moses. They did all these kinds of things because Moses was the picture of the law to them. And so he's still to this day in Judaism the picture of the law. I think you were saying like there's really two routes Judaism went.
When you look at modern Judaism, it comes from the Pharisaic line, and the other one would be Christianity. Those are the two that took the time period of the Second Temple and added.
It comes from Pharisees who were rabbis who then took all these Jewish people when the temple disappeared, and they said, "Here, we'll teach you in our classes at our synagogues." And they kind of took Judaism in the direction.
And what you need is something that covers atonement because you don't have a system of atonement anymore. And so for them, it is actually the Torah. The book almost becomes a replacement in many ways for God. And so who is the author of the Torah? And well, the first book, that's going to be Moses for most people. And so they're going to link the law and Moses closely together. It's almost a shorthand. And so you're going to value the guy who listened to God and gave you his ways. And it almost becomes, that's the only way I can attain salvation. And so in modern Judaism, it's like, well, how do you atone for sins if you don't have a temple? Well, you do good.
Yeah. And
that's atones for sins. And you see those early things in the Pharisees. Jesus is like, if you knew Moses, you knew that wouldn't be why he wrote the law.
Yeah, he was calling it out. He was like,
Moses
you guys,
knows me.
Yeah, you guys are turning Moses into something he shouldn't be.
You're turning him into something he shouldn't. Yeah, and so I think that's why you see the dispute.
Well, thank you, Nate, for that question. We've got a couple more questions, but we're going to answer them on other shows. So keep listening. But we appreciate you guys, and
we're glad that you guys joined us. We hope that you guys can continue with us, and we've got our next part of our Offended series coming up, and you can take a look at it online. If you don't go to Olive Branch, not a problem. Jump in, ask your questions. We'd love to hear from you at rabbittrail@obcc.church. That's rabbittrail@obcc.church. And we're going to continue to just kind of chase down this conversation on what it means to be offended for a few weeks, and hopefully that doesn't offend you. But we're having fun. We hope that you had a good time, and we're glad you joined us. God bless you guys.
And boom chakalaka.
Bye.